the McLaren pit. They've absolutely shot themselves in the foot, haven't they? Max Verstappen in a class of his own. The catch in the rain that he did in Brazil, utterly amazing. All of the glory is in the Drivers' Championship.
Hello and welcome back to the Inside Track with me, Majendie. This week, leading up to the Brazilian Grand Prix, we're joined by Rebecca Clancy, ex-F1 correspondent for The Times and former editor-in-chief at Autosport. She's also the co-host of another great Formula One podcast, Inside the Piranha Club. Hi, Beck. Welcome to the podcast. I just wanted to start with Max Verstappen, inevitably, and we've got 4 races to go, a couple of sprints as well. Will he win the world title or...?
I felt more confident going into Mexico. He had an amazing run since the summer break, hasn't he? We had that stat of him scoring 119 points, which was the same as the 2 McLaren drivers combined heading into Mexico. It didn't quite pan out how he would have wanted. I think without that virtual safety car at the end of Mexico, he would have got second, and then it would have been a bit spicier. But I say all that with the caveat that we are talking about Max Verstappen, who for me is, absolutely generational talent in a class of his own, is utterly brilliant. As you say, 4 races, 2 sprints. It's only 36 points to Lando Norris, who's now leading the championship. So yes, I have absolutely no doubt that he is still in the title fight. I think he's had such amazingly strong weekends when McLaren have been off. I think the big determining factor now will be how McLaren can move forward. So Lando Norris obviously won in Mexico. Can he keep that momentum going? What is going on with Oscar Piastri? Is it the pressure? He's only 24 years old. So I think there's still so much at play. There are still so many different factors. But I think with Verstappen, he's just so good, isn't he? He doesn't really have bad weekends. There was that really, what was that terrifying quote that Helmut Marko said that, well, terrifying if you're his opponents, saying that if Max Verstappen wasn't really up for it before the summer break because the car wasn't really working and he just wasn't really that motivated. And then he came back after the summer break. It was a bit better, but obviously Piastri won the first race back in Zandvoort. And then he went away, he went to the Nordschleife, got all his qualifications, and then went and won at the Nordschleife. And that was between Monza and Singapore. And then Helmut Marko just turned around and went, yeah, he's really up for it now. And you just think, that's a Max Verstappen you don't want to be racing against, because you don't often very much win against a Max Verstappen who's in that mood.
Because it's funny you say Zandvoort. If you think back to then, it looked like the title chance was dead and buried. It's mad to think that he's remotely in the mix now, if you just go back a few weeks.
That was 104 points. Yeah. At that point in Zandvoort, I think very much it was a case of this is Piastri's to lose. And I think he's doing that at the moment. I think Piastri, he's lost the lead in the championship for the first time since, where are we now? Back in April, Saudi Arabia. It was when he claimed it back off Norris. That 104 point turnaround. The thing is, it's such a long season, isn't it? And it's 24 races. It is absolutely brutal. We're all sat here now like, 4 to go. My goodness. But yeah, 104. But I have to say, when Singapore came around and that gap reduced down to 91, the podcast that I do, I was saying, actually, do you know what? There's just something about Max when he was in Zandvoort. Okay, it was his home race, and we know that there are certain tracks that do certain things to drivers. We see it, don't we, with like Lewis Hamilton in Austin. I'm not entirely sure I'd be surprised if Lewis Hamilton went and won in Brazil, for example, because, there's just something about tracks. Home races, they do it to you. So I think with Verstappen, he did come back from the summer break slightly revitalised. Okay, he didn't win that race. It was an enormous margin, but you can sort of imagine behind the scenes in the briefings, Verstappen and his race engineer, GP, just sitting there going, do you know what? Quite fancy this. Biggest turnaround ever. Yeah, let's do it. Why not? Car's feeling pretty good. And then you have to look at what Red Bull have been doing behind the scenes, because you can completely understand why most teams aren't developing their car anymore. 2026, enormous regulation changes, not just the engine, we've got the chassis as well. It's going to completely mix up the field. Most of the teams, including the top teams like McLaren, like Ferrari, have already changed their 26 car. And Red Bull have just gone, no, do you know what? I think we might stick with this one a bit longer. And it does actually make sense when you hear Laurent Mekies talking about it, the new team principal at Red Bull, because he's been saying, okay, I understand the idea of changing to the 26 car, but I've just come in and we can see from the start of the season that what we're doing back at the factory hasn't always been translating to what's happening on track. So actually, yes, they're bringing upgrades, but what they're also doing is checking their processes and checking how much the sim, what they're developing in the sim, how much that's actually relating to the track, because they did have an iffy period at the start of the year. I mean, they weren't anywhere near the title fight at the start of the year. And even when you look at the constructors, that's obviously gone. That's gone to McLaren. But that's also, it's kind of the stalking horse, isn't it, with Mekies saying, well, actually, we sort of have changed to 26 because we are testing our processes. We're doing all of this, but actually, we're also still developing this car in the sense, they brought that floor, was it to Austin? They brought big upgrades to Monza. So we're seeing all of these developments happen, making that Red Bull faster. I think it is absolutely on race pace. It is on a par with that McLaren now, which, was almost unthinkable at the start of the season. So I don't think there's anything more to come. I think particularly with the flyaways, you don't tend to bring too many upgrades, although they did with Austin. But I think it's sort of fairly brutal running now. We've got 4 races in 5 weeks. Everyone is just kind of clinging on to it to the end now, despite it being an amazing drivers' championship. But yeah, I think Red Bull have been really impressive, particularly since Mekies has come in. Obviously, he wasn't expecting it. It was a surprise. Horner was let go after the British Grand Prix in July, and he took the summer break. I think that probably came at a perfect time for Red Bull as well, for driver Verstappen and for the team. And they've gone, actually, yeah, have a bit of fun. You hear all the stories coming out from the factory. The culture's changing a bit. The development, how they approach races is changing, obviously to their advantage. And yeah, they do seem to be in quite a good place at the moment. Obviously with the constructors, that's all still to play for as well. But I think for Verstappen, you can see it in his driving. You can even see it when he's talking to us in the media. He's just, I don't know, he's having a bit of fun with us. And then you hear it in his radio messages again as well with GP. And he just seems to be enjoying this one.
I love that moment. Actually, did you listen to that from in Mexico where GP his bit accidentally went out to Max as well as somewhere else, and Max goes, "I can hear everything," which I just thought, to have that levity moment at 200 miles an hour, whatever he's traveling, says a lot about him and what he's able to do and multitask in the car.
I know. Can you imagine being GP though? Because he was talking about the pit stop strategies, and it's just been broadcast to all the other teams, and he's probably thinking, "Oh no!" I mean, talk about putting your finger on the wrong button. But it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes you feel like Max is like, "Oh, have you had some water, GP?" And "Are you okay, GP?" And he has these moments. They've got a great relationship.
There was quite a funny moment when I was in the garage for FP2, and GP was basically telling Max off for being overly tetchy, and there's like a little stroppy moment, and it wasn't like they were separated as Max got in the car, but they definitely didn't chat to each other for a moment, which sort of sums them up. But I wonder with Max, is this the most impressed you've been? I know he might not necessarily win the title, but has this been his best season in a sense?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think without a shadow of a doubt, if he did win the championship, it would be his best championship by far. I think if you go through his championships, obviously 21 was very contentious. Let's not go there. I still remember every single second of that season and every minute of the Abu Dhabi night. It was a long old night. And then 22 was, I would say, relatively straightforward. 23 was obviously utterly ridiculous. They won all but one race that year. It was complete domination from them. And then last year, a little bit of a challenge by Norris, but not really, let's be honest. It kind of faded away fairly quickly, almost as soon as it came around, and he won the championship with a few races to go. Is it his best? Oh, it's really hard to say without knowing the ending, isn't it? It would be up there. It would certainly be up there. I think what I would say is his most mature.
Yeah.
So I think true. The way he's gone racing, I think his experience is really showing. And I think this is what we're seeing now with the McLaren pair. As I mentioned, Norris has, had a bit of a taste of a championship fight last year, but not really. But I think actually, even with that little taster, that has helped him slightly with the pressure and understanding it, because it's not this new blow to him. Whereas Piastri at just 24, everything is brand new. And he said it was like his championships back in, because he's won, Piastri's won everything. He won Formula Regional F3, F2. And he was talking, wasn't he, and saying that, you know, it's quite similar. Those championships were hard fought as well. And then you think, yeah, but this is Formula One. It's a different ball game, isn't it? So yeah, I think the experience is really playing into Max's hand now, and he just goes racing a bit differently to everyone else. He sees gaps, which some might say aren't there, but he certainly sees them. And I think one of the things I do respect about Verstappen a lot, and I think a lot of this comes from working with Jonathan Wheatley as well, is that he very much is one of those drivers who knows the regulations inside out. For me, Jonathan Wheatley knows the regs better than anyone else in the paddock. And they very much work to the line. And then there's always that little grey area, isn't there? And I think Verstappen is excellent at knowing where that sort of area is that perhaps he might get away with it. And I think, you know, you can talk about Mexico. Did he deserve a penalty? Did he even really attempt the first corner? Some might say, certainly not the second. You know, should he have got a penalty for that? And it's amazing because one of the things that wasn't really spoken about in Mexico was that he was on 9 penalty points on his driving license. So he had to be a bit careful, because if he got 3 penalty points to take him up to 12, it's an automatic race ban. That's now gone because they work on a 12-year cycle. So 3 have now fallen off. So he goes into Brazil with 6. But he still races like he doesn't have, you know, 3 points away from a race ban. So I just think he's so mature. He's got so much experience. Yeah, it probably would be up there as one of his best. I'm thinking now if I can sort of remember. I mean, he's been around for so long, hasn't he? My goodness. He's still so young. He's not even 30 yet. Yeah, I think it would be up there as one of his best. But I think without the championship at the end, I'm not sure you could say it would be his best.
I guess you view him as the best driver on the grid. And if that's the case, what makes him the best? I mean, you touched on some of the moments just then.
I think if I knew the answer to that, I'd be very rich. I think it's raw talent, ultimately. I think, you know, just as we were talking then about his seasons, you look back to 2016 and he got, you know, dropped into the melting pot of F1, and Mercedes wanted him. Toto Wolff was courting him, desperate to bring him on board. It was so clear how talented he was. And Red Bull won that battle because they could offer him the seat in the junior team in Toro Rosso, as it was then, now Racing Bulls. And he got put into that seat and his talent was clear straight away. So much so that they decided to switch him into Daniel Kvyat's seat in 2016 in Spain. Okay, he was helped by the fact that the Mercedes pair of Rosberg and Hamilton crashed that race. But you know, you have to be in the right place to take advantage of that and to get the win. And he did get the win in his first ever drive for Red Bull. And it was astonishing. And then you can kind of fast forward through those seasons. And then you think about heading into Brazil, that drive in the rain in Brazil in possibly 17, was it? Or 16, maybe even the same year. And if you've never seen it, just pause, go on YouTube and watch Max Verstappen. The catch in the rain that he did in Brazil was utterly amazing. You hold your breath when you're watching it. How he didn't end up in the wall was astonishing. We talked about it, I mean, endlessly. It was utterly amazing. He is just, it's like when he gets into the car, he plugs in almost. The car and him are one thing. And I think also with Verstappen, he's so good, you're not entirely sure what's car and what's him. You know, it's always that battle in F1, the conversation never ending of what is man, what is machine. You know, you need obviously the good car, but you also need the good driver. And I don't think it's ever really a coincidence that the best drivers end up in the best cars, because you know, you talk to the likes of Lewis Hamilton's engineers and they always say the feedback that he gives is utterly amazing, because he can feel things within the car that they can't see in the data, or they couldn't see in the data. And then he'll say this happened in this turn, and this wasn't quite right. And then they'll go back to the data and they'll think, oh, that's what that was. Okay. And then Verstappen is the same. It's that feedback that you can give, the feel that they have for the car, and being able to drive the car beyond its limits. You know, there are certain drivers who need the car to be set up absolutely perfectly. You know, Jenson Button openly admits that he's one of those people. The car had to be perfect, which is why that 2009 season, okay, he went on to win the championship. But when that season started, it felt great in the car. And then the car kind of got away from him and he wasn't so comfortable anymore. And with Verstappen, I think you just have to look at what he does to his teammates. I mean, he absolutely annihilates his teammates every single year, pretty much. You know, he came in and Daniel Ricciardo pretty much left Red Bull because Max Verstappen came in, beat him, and it was pretty clear that Verstappen was this unbelievably talented kid at that point. Red Bull were making it very clear that they were going to set up the team around him. And then we've just seen this never ending cycle, haven't we, of teammates coming through. You know, and at the moment, we've got Max Verstappen in the championship, who's currently third. He's on 321 points. His teammate is Yuki Tsunoda. And let me tell you, it takes a while to scroll down to 17th, where he currently is. And he's only got 28 points. You know, Verstappen is a one-man band. In 2023, he literally won the Constructors' Championship for Red Bull on his own. Like, he's just phenomenal talent. It's the raw talent, it's ability to see the gaps, it's his racecraft. He's far cleverer in the car than people give him credit for. And it's just his ability to get so much out of the car.
And he's got amazing self-belief as well. I spoke to him in Mexico, and he said the only thing, asked him what's the one thing that could stop you winning the title, and he just said bad luck, which I think sort of sums up. He didn't mention the McLaren drivers. I thought that was sort of him in a nutshell. I liked that.
It's really funny, isn't it, when the language that they use, because we had the old adage from Norris after winning in Mexico saying, "Oh, I'm just taking it race by race." And I'm like,
Yeah.
do they just write that in the PR handbook and hand it out to the drivers? They must do. But with Verstappen, I thought it was interesting because I think it was Austin, obviously an unbelievable weekend for him in Austin, winning the sprint and the race. And he just came out and said, yeah, all the momentum's with me. You know, I could probably win this championship. Why not? And you think it's really interesting because in the run up to that race, he had been sort of not saying race by race because he doesn't play by the PR handbook, as his PRs well know. But he was kind of like, yeah. Like, look, the McLarens are doing a good job. We're there or thereabouts. I'll go out, I'll race, I'll see what happens. And then in Austin, the language changed and he very much felt like he was in it. And I think he does think that because it's not in his hands. He can't win every race and hope that they come second. He needs a bit more luck than that, like he says. But I think one of the things that Verstappen accepts, possibly more than the McLaren pair do, is that luck is part of sport. And actually, you have to be in the right place to take advantage of good luck. Sometimes you get bad luck, you know, that's life, whatever. But I think with Verstappen, he truly does believe that. And I think when you're watching him, you sort of think, actually, I know mathematically it's not in his hands, but you sort of think somehow it is.
Well, the other thing I'm interested by, his stock has sort of risen a bit. Like maybe that's just in a UK perspective, but he seems there's more people willing him on, more people on his side. I think than before. Do you think perceptions have changed from the start of the season to now? And maybe it's just because he's the underdog a bit.
So F1 fans are funny, aren't they? Because they're incredibly knowledgeable, and I think what we saw after 21 was this incredible tribalism that came out that I hadn't experienced before that. And it was very much the Hamilton camp versus the Verstappen camp. And they were very vociferous and it got really nasty. And there were a couple of years there where it was actually quite unenjoyable. And I think what's happening now is because that battle has kind of, well, obviously died away. Hamilton, unfortunately, not on form and not had the car. But I think what we're seeing this season and why I mentioned that the knowledgeable is because they understand what they're witnessing. So even if you're not a Max Verstappen fan, you can respect what he has done. You can respect the fact that he has got the gap down from 104 points at the summer break or after Zandvoort to 36 points now to Norris. You can appreciate that he has come into these weekends completely focused, completely dominating, that Red Bull now is on a par in the race with the McLarens. He has unbelievable racecraft. He has complete faith in himself. And if he did go on to win the championship, I don't think anyone could begrudge him that. And I think a couple of years ago, you'd have found plenty of people who would. Yeah. But I think now you just look at him and you go, do you know what? Fair play.
Who do you think? He says bad luck's his biggest threat, but of the two McLaren drivers, who's the biggest threat to him winning the title? The bigger threat of those two?
So I actually think it's Norris. So yeah. I think Norris has gone on, and I think one of the reasons Norris is dangerous at the moment is because he's gone under the radar. So Piastri was asked, I think in Austin, was it? God, they come so thick and fast, you get them mixed up, don't you? I think it was in Austin. He said, would you rather be the hunted or the hunter? And he said, well, of course you want the championship lead, like as in you always want track position. Of course, that's how you feel. But actually, I think for Norris, he had that run of races. So everyone was talking about Verstappen. Verstappen has scored 119 points. Verstappen has beaten the two McLarens for 5 races. Everything was looking at Verstappen. Everyone was closing the gap on Piastri. And what Norris was doing during that period was he was coming second to Verstappen, but he was beating Piastri at all of those races. And ultimately, that's all Norris needed to do, because for Norris, he shouldn't be worrying about Verstappen. If you let Verstappen get in your head, you've already lost.
Yeah.
So what Norris was doing was just saying, all I need to do is beat Piastri. And that is what he did. And he went into every weekend systematically going through his process, which he's changed. He was talking about this as well from the summer break. He's kind of changed his approach to race weekends as well. So he came in and he was chipping away at the seconds, at the thirds. Okay, Baku was a terrible weekend for him. He did not take advantage of Piastri's awful weekend at all. Qualifying and finishing 7th, it wasn't good enough from Norris. He made amends in Mexico, but it didn't matter because he was still finishing ahead. So I think with Norris, we were talking at the start about momentum, and momentum is so important in any sport, but in particular in Formula One. And I think Norris has that, but he's gone under the radar. So actually, he's in this lovely position of the 3 championship contenders where no one's really talked about him. And he's come out and he's won Mexico, and everyone's gone, oh, that's great. But what's going on with, and everyone's immediately almost reverted back to, but what's going on with Piastri? Has the pressure got to him? He's 1 point behind. Can he get back in front? What's happening with Verstappen? He's brilliant. He's amazing. The Red Bull, they're still bringing upgrades. And still no one is really talking about Norris. And I think Norris has somehow got himself into this great little position where actually he's in for a very good run into the end.
But you say that, but now he's leading the championship, and the pressure, I think the questioning from us Brit media will be different. I wonder whether that changes for him. Do you think at all, if, just because he's now setting the benchmark, as it were?
I think the questioning changes for him, but I found it really interesting after Mexico, as I say, that he won and it was almost immediately still, but Piastri and Verstappen, and no one was kind of saying to him, okay, you're leading the championship. Like, this is it. If you can just hold on for 4 race weekends, and there's still loads of points on the table as well. But if you can just hold on for those 4 race weekends, and I think, with a bit of a break now, thankfully, there's a bit of a gap, then we go to Brazil next weekend, and then there's a gap, and then we have the triple header running in. Brazil obviously has the sprint race, so that gets one of them out of the way. And whenever you have a sprint race in Brazil, it's always a phenomenal weekend. I mean, you can go back to a 21 in Brazil with Lewis Hamilton, and he said, oh, you made up 20 places, and he just replied, I made up 25. So it always leads to these amazing weekends. So I'm looking forward to Brazil. And I think for Norris, the questioning will change going into Brazil, because everyone will have had this break and time to sit back. They will have been absolutely flat at it at the factory, speaking to the team constantly. And yes, the questioning will change for Norris. The pressure will ramp up inevitably because he is ahead. But I think that being 1 point is almost the perfect place that he needed to leave Mexico. I think if it was actually more than that, he would be feeling the pressure a bit more. Whereas now he can say, do you know what? We're basically tied. So it's not there at the moment. But I think, we in the media, and they hate it when we do this, but we certainly will be ramping up the pressure on them.
It just happens, doesn't it? I just wonder, what have you made of like the papaya rules and McLaren's approach to their racing? It's good in a sense, but has it made it more complicated for them, or?
Oh yeah, they've absolutely shot themselves in the foot, haven't they? My goodness. I mean, they couldn't win. So you either let them go racing and you say it's all fair in love and war, or you instill team orders. And either way, we're not going to like it, are we? The papaya rules is an interesting one though, because Zach Brown was talking after Mexico, wasn't he? Saying, look, I don't even know where the papaya rules came from. That was you guys. That wasn't even us. Like, we aren't even talking about papaya rules internally. And I was thinking, I'm pretty sure Andrea Stella, the team principal, talked about papaya rules, but okay. Yeah. And ultimately, it's just about the fairness in racing. But I think it did go too far. And I think we saw it in Monza, didn't we? When the slow pit stops, which were absolutely a fault of the pit crew. And that's sport. And, talking about bad luck and good luck, that's bad luck. And I think Piastri, when he came on the radio afterwards and was told to give the place back, and he said, but hang on, we discussed this. Slow pit stops are a part of sport. And I thought, you know what? I agree with you. That's life. And I think they got themselves into a real pickle with it. And then I think with Baku, where Piastri had a just an all-round shocking weekend, then ended up crashing. Was it 3 mistakes in the end, culminating in him crashing on the first lap? And you sort of thought, oh, well, are they going to radio up Norris and say, look, Piastri's crashed out. Could you come into the pits and retire, please? Because we're trying to keep it fair. And you know, there were all these memes going around, and you just think, how ridiculous could this get? And I think we saw the booing in Monza with the Norris with the team orders, and I think that's one of the reasons that they were booing him again in Mexico, because it didn't feel like he had earned that lead in the championship to the fans, and they don't like the team orders. They don't like giving back the position. And obviously there have been a lot of rumours about the fact that McLaren are favouring Norris. You know, you don't have to go back that far. Zach Brown was part of Norris's management team. They worked very closely together. Piastri came in. He was in a ball of legal papers, but has proved himself to be utterly brilliant. I don't think that's true. I don't think they are favouring Norris. I think they have got themselves into such a muddle because they do not really care which driver wins. They do just want the driver to win. You know, we heard Stella saying, absolutely, Verstappen is in this title fight. That's a yes. And please, could you write that in capital letters, because that's how I'm saying it. And I thought, well, good, because at least you're acknowledging it. But actually the language changed again after Mexico. And then it was, actually, I do think one of our drivers can win the championship. And so they have got themselves into a pickle. They have made it more difficult for themselves. And I understood it up until the point that they won the Constructors' Championship, which they've now done in Austin. Yeah. And I think for me, it would almost be a case of, you know, if you're, let's say, Piastri on the radio and they come through and they say, oh, can you just let Norris through? I'd be like, what? Sorry, can't hear you. Look, radio's gone, going through a tunnel. You know, for me, they just have to, once the lights go out, radio messages are about boxing, couple of conversations about tires, maybe if you've got a car coming up behind you, whatever, but absolutely just let them go racing. Otherwise, just turn the radios off. Just don't talk to them about where the other driver is. Just leave them to it. Let them go racing. They're both experienced enough. They're not in their rookie seasons. Okay, the new fight for the championship, but you've just got to let them go for it now, because the constructors is where all the money is, and I totally understand that's why all the teams want to win it. But all of the glory is in the Drivers' Championship. No one really remembers who wins the Constructors' Championship, but everyone remembers who wins the Drivers. And that's the one that they want.
Yeah, that's very true. I just wonder if it seems a very long time ago, but if we wind back the clock to before the season started, has it played out as you anticipated? Did you think it would be Max versus the McLarens coming to the end of the season? Or?
No. What happened to Ferrari over the winter break? I mean, in the end of last year, we were all writing about that battle, weren't we, between McLaren and Ferrari, who was going to win it. It was so close right up until the end, went down to the wire. There was only a couple of points in it at the end of the season. And you thought, gosh, isn't this brilliant? We're coming into next season. Lewis Hamilton will be in that Ferrari alongside Charles Leclerc, who I think is utterly brilliant as well. It's slightly slipped under the radar this season, but he is brilliant. And I thought, you've got those two in that car, really strong partnership, versus McLaren, who I think also have a brilliant driver pairing in Piastri and Norris. I thought it was teed up to be this great battle between these two teams. Fred Vasseurs come into Ferrari. He'd been there a couple of years now. He'd got his processes in place. He'd got the drivers that he wanted. He'd changed around the departments and the setup slightly. McLaren were in a really strong place. Andrea Stella has done an unbelievable job there. He's been utterly fantastic, and a lot of the turnaround has to be laid at his feet. I think he's been brilliant. So no, I thought we'd be coming into the season opener talking about those two teams. I didn't think Red Bull would be as far off the boil as they were, but I do understand all of the distractions that have happened there, and they have been substantial and well spoken about, so don't need to go through those again. But McLaren just had the winter of their lives, didn't they? I mean, what they were doing over the winter break was just phenomenal. And I think when you look back at the end of last season, a lot of the momentum was with them, and then they clearly carried that through. Ferrari made a mistake somewhere. Something isn't sitting right. And to go back to what I was saying about with the upgrades that Red Bull are still bringing this season, and Mecchia saying we're testing our processes, I think what we've seen in Ferrari is that a lot of what happens back at Maranello isn't translating onto the track. And this is one of the problems that they've had, and Fred Vasseur has been speaking about it. And they can't they're not really understanding the car. And Charles Leclerc had that fairly brutal comment where he said, "We're just passengers. We can't drive this thing." And something isn't syncing properly between what's happening at home and what's happening on the track. And that's one of the reasons Red Bull is continuing their developments to test their processes. And it's what McLaren did incredibly well over the winter break, that they, in that end of last season, almost a year ahead of where the other teams were, they were testing their processes, which is why when they had the winter break, they were far more confident in what they were doing away from track, because we obviously have no testing now either. Until you get to the first test in what Bahrain, as it was this year, no one knew what was going to happen. Next year, it's a different kettle of fish, because we have those 3 tests. The first one completely closed, behind closed doors. We're not invited, probably understandably, because we'd write the truth. But there you go. They don't want us letting all these secrets out. But I think, the season, particularly initially, has not unfolded how I expected it to.
It's great credit to Max that he's turned this, what was it, a good 2-way battle into a 3-way battle. Now, if you dust off your crystal ball, then how does it end? Who wins? Is it Lando, Oscar, Max?
Crikey, Matt! Now you're asking. I would say at this stage, I could see it being Norris winning it on the last day from Verstappen and Piastri finishing third.
Wow, okay. And he also needs to beat Piastri by a certain more points than Monza, otherwise people will end up, saying, yes, what if you hadn't done that?
If he can win it by like 10 points ahead of Piastri, right. I think then it's like, okay, fine, Monza doesn't matter. He just needs to win it by enough that Monza doesn't matter.
It's brilliant. It's so good that we're still talking about it. I'd love it if it went all the way to the wire, to that last race in Abu Dhabi.
I think it will now. I think with Verstappen being in the form that he's in, that Red Bull being so quick, Piastri coming off the boil, it seems. There was a comparison made of it's like watching Rory McIlroy on the back 9 in the Masters all those years ago. Thankfully, he's obviously righted that wrong. But it does feel a little bit like that with Piastri at the moment. And I think it will go to the wire. I think these sprint races obviously backloaded into the season, which is making it even more interesting. As I say, Brazil, I think, is going to be an utterly brilliant weekend. Interlagos as a track is just phenomenal. It just produces such great racing. The drivers love it. It's a great weekend. Then the final sprint is at Qatar, because, quite frankly, money talks in F1. There's not much more to say on that. But then Abu Dhabi can often be a bit of a damp squib. But then we have Vegas, which thankfully, after an incredibly bad start and a very long 23-hour working day, which I remember well, that has actually produced good racing. So I think there's still a lot that can go right and can go wrong. And so I do think it will go down to the wire.
And what's your wildest prediction then for the end of the season?
I think there could be a driver move still, potentially. We've got, obviously, the Red Bull seats. I think Tsunoda's going to get dropped. I think Isaac Hadjar will end up in there. Then we've got the Racing Bulls. I think there could just be a bit of a shuffle, a bit of a mess. I think there could be some surprises to come in the driver market.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, it's going to be a captivating end to the season. But thanks so much for joining us as well. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
That's all for this week ahead of the Brazilian Grand Prix on Sunday. Next week, I'll be back with Rick Edwards to discuss everything that happened in Sao Paulo. Thanks for joining us here on the Inside Track podcast. Remember to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or all 3 if you fancy. Search for the Inside Track podcast or check out the show notes. The Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, a commercial company that's wholly owned by the BBC. It's produced and edited by John Weeks. Video editing and social media is by Georgina Rebel, and James Cook is the executive producer.